Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Hack Smarter Twitch channel. My name is Tyler Ramsbey. I am your host and have a really fun episode for you guys today. I am here with the Benjamin Caudill. I think I said your last name right that time. Ben, welcome to the Hack Smarter Twitch channel.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yes, that's how you say that.
Beautiful. Now, before we formally get started, for those of you on Twitch, if you can just let me know if everything sounds good, looks good to you. It's hard for me to monitor it. Everything on my side looks good. So if no one's yelling at me, I'm assuming we're good. We're at about 40 people on Twitch. So the 40 of you joining, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, also thank you for being here. I want to give a few shout outs before we dive into the actual interview. I want to give a special shout out to my friend Amoeba Man. He is over in the Work Smarter Discord channel. So one thing that I'm trying to change up is in the past with interviews, the only way you could interact is if you had a Twitch account, which I know can be annoying. So this interview today is being brought to you via 3 countries, which is incredible. I am here in the US. My friend Amoeba Man is in South Africa. He is monitoring the Discord chat. So if you're in the Work Smarter Discord, there's a special channel called Live Stream Chat. If you have questions and you don't have a Twitch account, you can drop your questions there. If they're good, Amoeba Man will see them. He'll pipe them over to Twitch, and then I will hopefully see your questions as well. We also have a Rhino Security Labs Discord with also a live stream chat set up. So if you're part of the Rhino Security Labs Discord, my friend Mohammed, who is from Egypt, is monitoring the live stream chat there, and he will also pipe your questions over here. So once again, special shout out to Amoeba Man and Mohammed, and also a special shout out to my friend Nate. Nate is modding the Twitch chat. So anyone who is spamming in Twitch, you will quickly get banned. So Nate, thank you. In the past, I tried to do all this on my own, and it was just way too much. With all that being said, I do want to encourage you guys on Twitch, ask questions. I want to prioritize your questions over my own. I have a bunch of questions that I think are good that we can go through, but once again, I want this to be interactive. So if you guys have questions for Ben as we go through this, drop those questions in Discord or in Twitch, and I will do my best to get to them. All that being said, the first question I like to ask people, Ben, is a classic elevator question. So we know each other, but if we had never met, who are you?
Ooh, who am I? Benjamin Caudill. I would say, computer hacker, security researcher, and founder of Rhino Security Labs. I would say at least that's the professional version. I also have a puppy, Theo, I'm pretty obsessed with, and do a lot of yoga. But those are those are probably not come up too much in this conversation.
Spend the whole time talking about yoga. No, that sounds
Yeah,
good.
good.
Over in Twitch, someone asked, what is the link for the other one? Okay, cool. Thank you, Nate. I was just going to ask you, Nate, to post that. So if you guys are watching on Twitch, Nate just dropped the link for the Rhino Security Labs Discord. Join that. It's not just for Rhino people. The goal of that Discord is to help people get into the field of pen testing and to resource pen testers. And we'll talk about a cool thing we're doing later on in the interview to add a lot of value through that Discord community. But Ben, you have been around the world of penetration and cybersecurity for a really long time, much longer than I have. And I would just love to hear your journey. Obviously, we can't spend the entire hour talking about it, but any just key people, key moments, key resources to help you get to where you're at today.
Yeah, I think my background, my kind of introduction or stepping into cybersecurity is actually like a lot of folks that I was kind of self-study. Went to college actually for business and economics, and I would say most of the way through college and realized I like the academic stuff I'm learning, but the career trajectory is not what I'm wanting. So spent a lot of time, nights and weekends focusing on learning networking, learning cybersecurity, building and hacking different labs at in my little apartment, and just kind of playing around with things, really as much as a hobby as kind of an aspirational hope that I could get into the industry someday, right? Keep in mind that when I was in college, there was certainly no cybersecurity degrees, so that was there were many fewer options, I'll say, with respect to the paths in. But yeah, did a lot of self-study, and I got really lucky, got really fortunate to have Boeing reach out to me. Actually, that was my first job out of college. Actually, was still in college. Was Boeing internship in cybersecurity, and through that was able to kind of get my foot in the door. Was way unqualified for it, but learned quickly, and nose to the grindstone, was able to kind of get my foot in the door and move in from there. That was a really big opportunity for me, and really appreciate all the people at Boeing. Too many people to count, frankly, but all the people at Boeing that helped me get where I'm today.
Very cool. Honestly, I got a few follow-up questions just based off of that. So you went to
Yeah.
school for business, economic type stuff.
Hmm.
I would really love to hear your thoughts, maybe real briefly. Obviously, the big thing in the news is the bank situation. We had
Mm.
one bank, especially focused on startups, that essentially collapsed, and we have some crypto-focused banks that have also collapsed. A lot of us who are not in that world, who aren't managing a business, who don't have a degree in business and economics. Obviously, there's a bigger macroeconomic conversation around this, but I'm just curious your thoughts on how all of this will affect pen testing, or will it affect pen testing? Will it affect cybersecurity? Will it affect startups in this field from your perspective?
Hmm. Um, I don't think it'll actually affect the industry too much. Once the initial, I'll say, ripple effects of Silicon Valley Bank kind of get ironed out, I think a lot of that has already happened. Users are getting depositors are getting access to their funds again, which were temporarily frozen. There were a number of related after effects and aftershocks, if you will, of that. Actually, one of those just I believe this is this morning, last night. Credit Suisse, another massive bank, much larger, just got bailed out by another Swiss competitor, another Swiss bank, that was kind of going down also as a result of kind of similar, I'll say, similar types of activities, similar types of effects. So there's certainly a lot of impact, kind of broadly in the business community. I don't think it actually affects technology too much. Which I hope I don't put my foot in my mouth for what comes next. But I think a lot of the things that have happened with respect to penetration testing and technology companies as a whole have largely been resolved with some of the actions that the Fed has taken, the federal government has taken.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. The other question I would love to talk to you about is, you mentioned you went to school for business and finance, did
Mm.
not go to school for cybersecurity, wasn't really a thing back when you were in college, and you spent a lot of time doing self-study. One of the big
Mm.
questions, and here's kind of the target audience, I think, where a lot of people are who might be watching this conversation, is they maybe they're not in IT yet, or maybe they are in IT, maybe they're in an IT support role, and they want to break into cybersecurity. It's kind of the buzzword. It sounds like there's a bunch of money in cyber, but they don't
Sure.
know how to do it. Would you advise people going back to school, getting like a former bachelor's degree in cybersecurity? Would you advise them to focus on certifications? Would you advise them to do both? I mean, what would be your advice on the difference between formal education, certification, self-study? What value do you place on each one of those?
Yeah, I get this question all the time, and I always come back to, it's a little bit of a case by case answer, based on the person and the situation they're looking to get into. I was talking to a gentleman the other day who had a deep bench of military experience and worked in the federal government, and was looking to kind of use his security clearance and experience there to get into cybersecurity. And in that case, I would say, federal agencies, defense contractors tend to, yeah, prefer formal experience or formal education over certifications, and kind of and again, I know this sounds a little bit in conflict with my own experience, but again, I think this is different experiences at different times tend to prefer that formal education over certifications and self-study. That said, I would say a majority of those opportunities, including Rhino, are very much oriented towards, what do you know, what can you demonstrate, and however that comes about, legally, ethically, however you get that education and experience, is there's a lot of ways to skin a cat, so to speak. So yeah, I strongly recommend self-study. Strongly recommend some good certifications. Not all of them are great, but there's a lot of them that are really productive for establishing that baseline understanding, baseline education that frankly you can get for a fraction of the cost of a bachelor's degree. So yeah, generally speaking, I would definitely recommend that.
Very good. Makes sense. We have a few questions on Twitch, so I just want to let you guys know on Twitch, I see your questions. I promise we'll get to them. They kind of fit into some other questions coming up, but keep asking your questions. So I know, looking over at the viewership, a few people have joined since I gave my initial spiel. So I just want to remind you guys, I want you to ask questions, and I want to prioritize your questions. You can ask questions in one of two ways. If you have a Twitch account, just drop your question here on Twitch. I got Twitch pulled up on my monitor. I am watching it. Otherwise, if you're in the Worksmitter Discord or the Rhino Security Labs Discord, there are channels in both of those called live stream chat. Drop your questions there. I have people monitoring both those channels, and they will pipe them over to Twitch. So once again, if you have questions, keep them coming. I promise you that I see them, and I will do my best to get to them. But before we dive into those questions, once again, just to set a little bit of the context, Rhino Security Labs, we recently celebrated the 10-year anniversary of Rhino, which I'm sure is more crazy to you than it is to me. Like, I could celebrate maybe my 4 months at Rhino, but that's incredible. Rhino's been around now for a little over 10 years, from being a startup to really a premier pen testing firm. But for you to start Rhino, I would have to imagine you left a relatively comfortable, likely well-paying job to go into something that was completely unknown. And I'm sure to those around you, they thought you were a little bit crazy. Why? Why did you start Rhino? Why did you leave the comfort of whatever you were doing to start a brand new startup focused around pen testing?
Yeah, so as you said, I had been working in pen testing prior to Rhino. I'd been doing penetration testing, security research type roles for a number of years prior to that. At different consulting firms, and all of them had great companies that had strengths and weaknesses, like any company. But I found that one of the common denominators of that, one of the common threads, was that a lot of the management, a lot of those who were overseeing technical projects, overseeing pen tests, even overseeing the research initiatives that were sometimes going into that, were not very technical themselves. So it tended to be like a real disconnect between the engineers, the pen testers themselves, and those that were kind of running those organizations. Sometimes even at smaller firms. So I found that was kind of an opportunity for me, an area that I could show some unique value. Having obviously a technical background myself, and I'd been thinking about starting a pen testing firm for some time at that point. I thought this was a good ingress point. I thought this was a good sort of catalyst to make the leap and make it worth the risk.
And were there any key moments just in the beginning years of Rhino that helped Rhino stand out? I'm sure starting a startup, you're not making a whole bunch of money in the first year, the first 2 years. It takes some time to build that traction. Yeah. Were there key moments in Rhino's story that helped really establish Rhino?
Oh gosh, I would say a lot of very small things that don't seem significant until quite a bit later afterwards. There was 100 little things that I could talk about that, I had this conversation and met this person and did these things and did this research. And, a lot of times, at least in my experience, founding a company, it's there's a very delayed reaction, a very delayed impact for a lot of those, for a lot of the work that you're doing. So it's really hard to know what is making a difference, what's moving the needle in various ways, and what you're wasting your time on. And I'll say I did waste a lot of time in different activities, different things that were not productive to the company, were not helpful in the early years. But gosh, it's hard to point to one thing. I suppose one would be the security research around Secretly, which again is no longer around. Probably very few people are familiar with that, but it was a startup at the time based around sort of anonymous social networking, I suppose, that people could connect with each other, basically upload their contact list and anonymously connect with one another, not really knowing who is saying what, but knowing that this is someone in my circle or someone in one of their circles. And was able to find, as part of this research, kind of a series of vulnerabilities that allowed an attacker to essentially de-anonymize any of those messages, which at the time was pretty impacting. It was very popular in Silicon Valley and a lot of tech startups, and there was a lot of very sensitive information that was being exchanged and shared. It was sort of the grapevine of the tech world at the time. So that was finding that vulnerability, and actually there was a Wired story that came out on that Wired article, was pretty impacting. That was an interesting milestone at the time.
Very cool. And we'll pause my questions. I will jump over to you guys' questions on Twitch. There's a lot of questions coming through on Twitch. A lot of them are about AWS, and I think I was planning on asking about that. So one of the things Rhino is known for, of course, is AWS pen testing, developing specific tools around AWS pen testing. So let's talk briefly about that. Then we'll dive into those specific questions. But I know from talking to you that when Rhino first started doing security research into AWS, like nobody else was doing it, and at times it was viewed kind of as a silly endeavor. Can you just share with us how that entire field has changed from the beginning days of doing research into it to where AWS pen testing is at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, anytime AWS pen testing comes up, particularly in interviews, I always make a real point to stop and kind of give credit where credit is due. Spencer Geeson was the one who is since passed away, was really the primary researcher on a lot of that work. Kind of built the first version of Paku pretty much by himself. Contributed very heavily to the AWS pen test book that I released, and many other things. He was a huge impact on Rhino, and I would say more generally the industry in terms of AWS pen testing. So always want to make sure that credit is given to him where appropriate. He's an excellent researcher and a really good guy. With respect to AWS and kind of the evolution of the industry, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was seen as a very kind of silly and almost nonsensical thing from a lot of, in fact, I would say most people. And in fact, when we had first, Spencer and I had first done a lot of this research and found that some of these things were really as promising as we had believed in theory, and actually wrote Paku kind of around these various attack vectors. We actually applied for several spots in Defcon, doing a couple different talks on different things, thinking that we'll get maybe, I don't know, one or two, and they came back with some pretty harsh criticism. We were rejected from all of them, but they came back. The sort of anonymous feedback, pseudo-anonymous feedback was pretty directly like, this is nothing new. Pen testing in AWS is no different than on-prem pen test, and just like completely it was surprising how far ahead of the industry were in that the skepticism and the criticism was pretty heavy, even from those that we would consider pen testing and technical experts. So that was a pretty rough couple years. Frankly, we went to a number of different conferences and talked to a lot of different clients, a lot of potential clients, about AWS pen testing, again, for years before there was any recognition that was a real real attack vector, a real threat. The number of times that I've heard, again, from very technical folks, oh no, we're going to AWS, so we don't have to worry about pen testing, so we don't have to worry about patching and things. And yes, you don't have to worry about patching if you're running in a serverless environment, but in some ways, but there was so many other things that they were missing the mark on. When you have an on-prem environment, obviously you don't have AWS IAM policies and things to deal with. So there was a lot of things that were missed or even misunderstood that have in the years since certainly been worked out and is becoming much more popular. The security risks and the number of tools and even other pen test companies who are kind of jumping on the bandwagon has grown substantially, and it's wonderful to see. But yeah, that was definitely an interesting time when we were kind of the lone promoters of this new attack vector, new series of attack vectors that there wasn't a lot of recognition for.
And how do you handle that criticism? So I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I would imagine if I'm vulnerable and if it's me and I have this idea that I think is solid, but like I go to the industry experts and they basically tell me, dude, you're full of it. I don't know if I would keep pursuing it. Like I'd probably, be like, okay, clearly I'm missing something that everybody else is seeing. Like what I'm doing is a waste of my time, waste of my company's time, waste of resources. Of course, Rhino kept pushing through and it has paid off. But how did you push through? How did you manage that kind of criticism from leaders in the industry?
Yeah, that was definitely tough. And I think that was probably tougher on some of the other people involved, Spencer and others. Again, it takes a village for projects like these. But the number of other people that were involved, I think it was a little bit harder on them in getting that level of criticism and the criticism from the from the authorities that we had than it was for me. I think for myself, it was I always sort of saw it as like a misunderstanding that if you don't, because we were well past the theory point, we had tools and so forth to kind of demonstrate this. And I think there was a lot of conversations where my response to, oh, this is nothing, was, assuming it was a dialogue rather than just an announcement, was sort of, I think you're missing something, and trying to gracefully inform them without, without insulting them. Again, with so many people being so strong, having such expertise, being in the industry, much longer than me, I think there can come not arrogance, I wouldn't say, but like a certain confidence in your ability and your own judgment that I think having those conversations where I had to gently inform others about maybe viewpoints that had been missed, that was really tough. But walking through it, here's a demo of Pacu. Here's how this could happen. If we start with this user with your developer creds as you have laid out for us, here's what we could theoretically do, bang bang bang, and then we have access to your whole DevOps pipeline. We have access to all of your EC2s, all of your Lambda. We can edit your Lambda code to do all sorts of malicious things in the app, and that slowly started to turn some heads. But that was still a pretty tough process. Yeah.
So what was the temptation to like go back to all these people and say, "I told you so"? Right?
It's there's always a temptation, right?
Yeah.
When you're just ahead of the game. But I think everyone's doing the best they can. I'm certain that I either have or will do similar mistakes myself, where
Sure.
I just miss the mark on something, and you have to eat my words. So being not being a sore winner, I think is a big part of that.
Humility.
Yeah.
That is so good. So following up on the AWS pen testing question, this actually comes directly from Twitch. Someone said, follow-up question, steps to becoming an AWS pen test guru after completing CloudGoat. Now, everybody watching this may not know what CloudGoat is. For those of you who follow me on YouTube, you know that I've done kind of a series on CloudGoat. But real briefly, Ben, from your perspective, 2-minute version, what is CloudGoat? Let's begin with that, then we'll answer his follow-up question. So for those who don't know what it is CloudGoat?
Yeah. So actually, I'll if I can expand that question very slightly, Paku and CloudGoat, if
Yes,
people haven't heard of both. Paku in a phrase, I would say, is sort of the Metasploit for the cloud. This very modular attack framework specifically for AWS, and actually soon expanding into other clouds, which is designed to make it very easy for AWS pen testers, for attackers to identify vulnerabilities and leverage those in different ways. So that's Paku. CloudGoat, I would say, is sort of the the other side of that, the series of vulnerable environments, or CloudGoat scenarios, as we call them, which you can spin up in your own AWS account, completely separated from the internet, so there's no, or hopefully no security threats from that if you follow the instructions. But then you can create and attack your own vulnerable AWS resources. There's a number of things in there that ensure that the that every scenario is unique enough or distinct enough that there's no risk of one person's keys accessing another user's environment or anything like that. But it does provide you as a user, as someone looking to do this professionally, gives you an opportunity to dig into this, very similar to like a WebGoat or Mutility or other vulnerable by design environments that we typically see in network and web application environments.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, for those of you interested in that, shameless plug for myself, on YouTube, I have a whole intro to CloudGoat video where we walk through the GitHub, explain it step by step, and I help you launch that first scenario, and then I have walkthrough videos for many of the scenarios. And we got a shirt. I should have worn my CloudGoat shirt. It's somewhere upstairs. We got shirts. It's an incredible platform. What I love about it is learning AWS pen testing. There are not too many resources out there for individuals. I know big platforms have like Hack the Box as a business license, but only businesses are eligible. You can't learn AWS pen testing on your own very easily, but CloudGoat is an incredible resource. So the second part of that person's question is, how do they then become a pen test guru? They've completed CloudGoat. They understand the basics. What is that next step?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I would say, frankly, if you're going through CloudGoat and you've completed all the scenarios, you're actually in a pretty good spot already. I mean, that there are a number of sort of prereqs within AWS that if you're not already familiar with the cloud and the various cloud technologies, that can be a hurdle. But if you've gone through that, I would say you're in a pretty good position to take on some bigger things. There's actually AWS Penetration Testing with Kali Linux, a book that I wrote again with Spencer, is another one to check out. Might be. Oh, here we go. We have some copies to give away. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So that is one of those resources. There are a number of other AWS courses and things out there that again, I haven't checked out all of them myself. Pentest Academy, I believe, is one of those that has a series of courses on AWS security, AWS pen testing. But another one I recommend, even for those at Rhino, is looking to get into that field. The Amazon certifications themselves are pretty good. There's a couple of basic ones, and then another on security. Again, I don't know all of the entire tier of those, but those are having the breadth, the foundation of again, cloud infrastructure and how you develop and expand on that is a pretty big part of cloud pen testing as a whole. I mean, really, like anything else, as doing web application testing, you really have to know how web applications are built. How do applications work normally before you can really get to the point of identifying vulnerabilities and identifying weaknesses in those. So just understanding Amazon and other cloud services sort of from an infrastructure and an architectural perspective, that goes a long ways.
So good. And another question from Twitch. So following up with that and I will just say, for those of you on Twitch, if you see me skip over your question, I'm not purposely ignoring you. I'm trying to group these questions into categories in my head on the spot. So I will try to come back to your question. But Amoeba Man asked this. He said, what are your thoughts on cloud security, specifically around compromise, then goal execution? We're seeing quite a bit of compromise on-prem, move, and compromise cloud, but any interesting cases for cloud compromise leading to on-prem compromises? He says, I've seen some interesting OneDrive things. Any other things to keep a lookout for? So lots in that question. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, we none of our clients, but I've heard of cases, I'll say, where companies have had cloud vulnerabilities, cloud compromises come back to on-prem environments or on-prem resources, on-prem data, um, primarily through compromised IAM or actually in this particular case it was an EC2 instance with an application that had SSRF. Attacker had grabbed the metadata keys and leveraged that to gain access to the cloud, and then used that and the compromise of the underlying EC2 to pivot with their direct connect being the service for kind of connecting your data center, connecting in a location to your AWS cloud, and leverage that to pivot back into the on-prem data center that they had, which was, in some ways much more tightly secure. That was kind of the keys of the kingdom in that particular environment. So yeah, there are certainly areas of kind of privilege escalation or lateral movement between different clouds, between different data centers, that the vulnerabilities in one can be used to exploit or compromise areas that are connected to it. Absolutely.
Fascinating. For those of you on Twitch, if you do have more questions about AWS cloud stuff, feel free to ask them. The other theme that I'm seeing on the Twitch questions is a lot of career stuff, which I wanted to spend some time talking about career. So we'll maybe pivot over to that. Before we dive into that, is it cool if I make the announcement of what we're hoping to do at Rhino? As an introduction to the cloud stuff?
By all means, yeah. Go ahead.
Cool. So here's the official announcement. I mentioned that we were going to make a cool announcement. One thing that we want to do at Rhino is give back to the InfoSec community in a way that is really free, kind of free of strings. There's nothing added to it. And the way we are hoping to do this, and kind of calling it an experiment to see how it goes, is we are going to start free career coaching on a bi-monthly basis. What that means is we're hoping to take 6 people every year. Once we get the process down, we're really hoping to do it every single month. So 12 people a year. And we're going to have a very easy application process where you just kind of share your background, why you get into pen testing, and then every 2 months we will select one person, and this is what you get if you're selected as that one person. Once again, completely free. You don't pay anything for this. You'll get a full resume review from the team here at Rhino, so professionals in the field. We'll also do a full mock interview where we jump into a Zoom interview just like we do with real candidates for pen testing. We'll ask you the same exact questions we ask real candidates, so you get a feel for like what is it actually like to go through a technical interview for a pen testing job. We'll then take that interview. You'll get feedback from the person who interviewed you, but we'll also share that wider with other pen testers at Rhino so they can provide very specific feedback on how you did in the interview. And then we'll give you personalized feedback on your resume, personalized feedback on your interview skills, how you did in the interview, and some very clear next steps that you can take to really move into the field of pen testing. So if that is something you're interested in, the one requirement that we're going to have is you have to be a member of the Rhino Security Labs Discord. We're hoping to make that a community where we can help people get into the field of pen testing. Even if you don't work for Rhino, we just want to give back. So if you're hired by another pen testing company and we help you do that, awesome. That is a win for us. So Nate, if you don't mind, I know you are on here. If you can drop the link for the Rhino Discord one more time in the chat, just as people are hearing this, they can jump into that Discord. We're hoping to start this next month, so in April. So just stay tuned. We'll be coming out with more specific information of how we are planning on doing that, but just know that it is coming. It is free. There are no strings attached. It's a way that we can give back to the community. Ben, did I miss anything? Because I totally went off memory there with no notes. Did I hit everything right?
I think you hit all the major points. And actually, one thing, and maybe this is one of the questions that's coming soon, with regards to where this largely came out of a lot of pen testers or pen test candidates. Kind of the one common weakness that we see with a lot of folks is just not having gone through the interview process before. Being a little bit unprepared for a handful of little things that don't make them a bad candidate, but just they're not quite there at the moment. So this is largely to kind of help people prepare for something that maybe is not coming right now. They're not ready to jump into pen testing yet, but they are kind of getting the skills and getting more comfortable with pen test interviewing that they can get in a little bit easier when the time is right.
And here's something you shared. Once again, this is in a different, just offline conversation that I found interesting. It was unexpected to me. There's so many people who want to get into pen testing. They hear about this field. There's entire Discord communities. People are trying to break into pen testing. And you told me that when you are hiring for pen testers, it's not an easy process from the perspective of the hiring manager, trying to find solid pen testers to hire to be part of this field. So on one side, you have all these people interested. On the other side, you were saying as a hiring manager, it is hard to find good candidates. Why do you think that is? So before we dive into like the specific tips for people wanting to get a job, from the perspective of a hiring manager at a macro level, why is there that tension?
Fundamentally, I would say this may be a very economic centric view is supply and demand. There's a ton of need for pen testers, and obviously Rhino is almost perpetually hiring. We're always looking for folks, but so is every other pen test company. So is almost every other large tech company. Frankly, even large companies that have nothing to do with technology or seemingly nothing to do with tech are also getting into it. Cybersecurity and now penetration testing are becoming such big issues, big needs for larger companies, kind of across different industries, across geography, that the need for pen testers, the need for security personnel has just skyrocketed, right? Over the last, I would say 10, 15 years, just absolutely exploded. So I'd say that's the biggest thing, that we Rhino are in a way kind of competing with every other company in the world for finding the best talent, finding the best folks who are want to do this. So that's a big part of it. Second, I would say the resources that are out there for training on this. Again, I'll come back to how do you get in? I'll say patchy. It's not a real clear path. Like, I don't know, not to say that this is easy, but I do think this is clear. Becoming a lawyer, right? Everyone kind of knows, go to law school, pass the bar. Like, I know nothing about law, and I know that those are two of the milestones there. And I think cybersecurity and particularly penetration testing, I think so many people who are interested or even actively looking to get into it sort of conceptually have no idea as to what those milestones, what those paths might be. And what might make it even more confusing is that there's lots of different paths. There is no one set of things to get into the industry. You can, if you have a computer science degree, that might and you're just coming out of college, that might be a path in itself if you want to get into application security, for example. If you're doing a lot of self-study or in an IT help desk or IT operations of some kind, that again could be another way in. There's so many different things that depending on exactly what you're looking for and where you want to be, there's a lot of routes into pen testing, and that makes it tough both on the hiring side, but especially on the candidate side.
That's a really unique perspective, and I'm sure those of you watching also find it unique. Just like me, I just recently got into pen testing. It was my goal. So even as you shared that, I recognize that there are a lot of different paths. Not all paths are made equal. And then depending on what position you're applying for, right, one path might be good, one path might not be good. One thing that you mentioned is that all kind of companies are hiring pen testers. And Lizzie asked this question over on Twitch. Do you think there's a difference in skill set between an in-house pen tester versus consultant pen testers? What are your thoughts on that question?
Ooh. Yeah, so I've actually been, excuse me, I've been in both roles, both in-house pen tester at a major bank many years ago, as well as consulting in several different organizations. And I would say, depending on the, I wouldn't necessarily put those in two categories. I mean, there are certain comparisons there, but depending on the organization for being an in-house pen tester, that can look like a lot of different things. And similarly in the consulting world, that can look like a lot of different things. From my experience being an in-house pen tester, there was much more focus on proprietary technical depth, So being in the banking world, there were a number of different, very, very old, very archaic financial systems that I was very involved in. Actually, one thing I did for a hot minute was doing ATM hacking, which was kind of fun. But again, not something that you would typically see in a consulting role unless you have, a client who is looking for that sort of specialty. So I would say the type of roles, the skill set that you have in an in-house role tends to be a little bit more, maybe a little bit less diverse. You get really deep in this one particular area, and a lot of that is very, centered around, I'll say company politics, company needs, and all the things that go around that, particularly for large kind of bureaucratic organizations. On the consulting side, I would say it's a lot more, generally a faster pace. A greater percentage of your time is, hands-on keyboards, actually doing the hacking and researching and stuff like that. But there is, sometimes a little bit of a trade-off in terms of, how intense that is. I think burnout is a little bit more common in the consulting world, especially pre-pandemic. There was very often a heavy trend of traveling quite often. At Rhino, we have almost 0% travel. Unless you're particularly interested in that, that's not really something that we do much. But I would say in general that those are kind of some of the trade-offs that I've seen. You also tend to have in a consulting role, particularly at Rhino, a lot more exposure to different technologies, right? Different technologies, different needs, different industries, companies of all shapes and sizes, and there's a lot of diversity there that you don't get in just consulting in general, that you don't get when you're an in-house resource.
That is good. I never even thought about that question. So Lizzie, thank you for asking that question. That's really insightful for me. On that, so you mentioned Rhino, and this is actually from the Rhino Discord. Mohammed passed it over here. He said, Michael is asking what qualifications or background would help a job candidate stand out to Rhino for an entry pen testing role. I think you're probably the best person to answer that question. So what are your thoughts on that?
To qualification or background to stand out. Gosh, again, I'm gonna, at risk of not answering your question, I'm actually gonna sort of answer the opposite question first.
Yes.
Because this has come up multiple times, that candidates will, again, and I'll say all this with a very generous and understanding mindset. I think there's been a lot of folks who have tried to apply, and again, Rhino certainly, but this is not exclusive to Rhino, who have tried to set themselves apart in a pen testing role by doing things that were, and maybe even in the application process, in the interview process, doing things that were very questionable. I've had more than one person stalk me to various degrees. I mean, there's no other way to say that.
It's just OSINT, right? It's just open source.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And that's why I say, that is being generous about the interpretation of that. That is, I know that's where they're coming from, and sometimes they even point that out explicitly. Here's what I can do from an OSINT and information gathering perspective. But one, I would say that's, unless you have a completely new data source or like some really unique OSINT perspective, that's generally not something to set yourself apart. But also, pen testing or any other role, you're also kind of giving an impression about yourself. This is someone you're, as the hiring manager, someone you're potentially going to be working with. And so just generally speaking, like any other role, certainly not unique here, acting in a professional, stand-up way is a good place to start.
So don't be
So I would,
creepy. That's awesome.
yeah, don't be creepy. The number of people I've had who have, stalked me or found, um, I don't know, sometimes like really like just super trivial vulnerabilities and tried to like a WordPress thing or something, and tried to use that as sort of like, I'll say leverage, leverage rather than blackmail. Try to use that as leverage to get a job or to get an interview or something. Uh, I could talk at length about the number of really, I would say, uncomfortable experiences I'd have uh, by people trying to set themselves apart in some way. So I would say, first and foremost, make sure that as you're doing that, as you're going about, and I'm all for, set yourself apart and reach out. Frankly, I would say even reaching out to people directly, having a nice, cold, professional conversation goes a long way. And I think generally people are pretty responsive to that. Um, but yeah, to go back to Michael's question, I would say, you know, uh, any sort of certifications is a gold star. Security Plus, Network Plus are a couple of those. Again, really like foundational technologies, but I think those are a good place to start. The OSCP, of course, is a really popular one. There's a number of other certs from OffSec and other companies that are really great. Lots of hands-on stuff that kind of show what you can do in a very tangible way. I think some of those certifications, CEH, for example, at least last I checked, were basically just multiple choice. There was not any hands-on portions. So from an interviewer's standpoint, it's hard to know what that really means, right? Does this person actually know something, or can they do the job, or is this just passing a multiple choice test? So certifications, hands-on stuff. If you have a blog or any sort of writing things that you've done as as you're doing your learning, as you're setting up your hacking lab or anything else, kind of sharing your content. Actually, I was talking to one person actually over the weekend who she had been posting as she was going through her pen testing lessons, posting these like really nice, like well formatted notes on LinkedIn for everyone to see, everyone to access. And we got talking, that's actually a great way to set yourself apart. So I would say things that are productive, generally helpful to other people, show what you can do, and don't cross any, ethical, moral, legal lines. I can't emphasize that one enough. I would generally, that is kind of the set of parameters that I would encourage.
That's good. So a follow-up question on that from another person, and I know the answer to this from my perspective. Would love to hear your maybe deeper explanation. But they said, what is in more demand? So I think this is someone wanting to get into pen testing. So to land that first pen testing job, that's the context. They said, what is in more demand, if any, web application or network vulnerability? I think they mean like network pen testing. Which one would you say to focus on to get that first pen testing role?
Yeah, so I get this question a lot, just about what specific technologies, broaden a little bit. What specific technology should I research or should I focus in? And I have kind of two answers for that. And I'll start by saying passion goes a long ways. Whatever you are really, really interested in, generally speaking, I think that is a path to follow. Not always, again, I'll go back to OSINT and information gathering. It's a useful skill, but I would say having that as your core skill, I think that's going to be a tough way to get into the industry. But if you absolutely love doing IoT hacking and hardware stuff, and you've done that as a hobby all of your life, and you want to turn that into a more security oriented, pen testing oriented career, you definitely go into IoT and hardware stuff. And similarly, with network admins who are, wizards at networking and system administration, those sort of things, obviously follow that. Application developers for web and mobile apps. So I say, sort of my first answer is, try a little bit of everything, follow your passion, follow what you enjoy, because you're going to spend more time doing it. You're going to be a little bit more attentive, a little bit more excited, and all that stuff. It's a compounding effect as you get more into it, and you find that you continue to really enjoy this. The attention and the time and dedication you have to that is going to count, right? Is going to make a big difference. So that's one answer. My second answer is a little bit more of again, sort of a supply and demand, like, what is the industry looking for? Web application for sure. There's a lot more there's a lot more need for and I would say not just web applications, but I think that's a good place to start in application security if you don't have another specific area of interest or expertise. Web app pen testing is a major skill that many companies are looking for, and if you find all the technologies equally interesting, that's what I would suggest.
So good. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit, but we're almost to the end of the interview. So believe it or not, we're like 5 minutes away till the top of the hour. So time flies when you're having fun, right? Like there's so many questions that we didn't even get. So that just means we'll have to do a part 2 sometime. And it'll just be like Ask Ben questions, and we'll just ask you questions for an hour. So this has a lot of stuff in this question. It's from Mr. T. Peppers. So he said this: I have heard that many people on the blue side of the industry state that red teaming or pen testing will be overtaken by AI or machine learning models, eliminating the need for human intervention. In what ways do you think this may be correct? And in what areas do you believe the human element will remain a necessity? Follow up, in what ways do you believe these resources will help pen testers rather than hurt them? So a couple questions loaded in there. One, so let's just first talk about, ChatGPT, AI. Will that take away pen testing jobs? Will you fire all the pen testers at Rhino and we'll just have ChatGPT, the pen tester, testing stuff? Like, what does that look like in the future from your perspective?
No, I would say nowhere in the near future. But actually, I think the tail end of that question is really interesting. Is it going to help or hurt pen testers? And I think, again, sort of a broader question about AI. I think it's going to help a lot of people, including pen testers, well before it actually replaces anyone's job. And I think kind of seeing that in two distinct phases or two distinct stages of technology and AI development is important to see. I would say, for the foreseeable future, I see AI and similar technologies really being a huge asset to, honestly, for pen testing, primarily in communication. As engineers, we are not always the most eloquent in communicating some of the findings and communicating our ideas, and having an assistant, a digital assistant, to kind of facilitate some of that. I'll be the first to say I do that all the time. I have ChatGPT actually as my homepage now for Chrome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, every time I'm on the computer, there's always something like I have this idea, I have this, and sometimes it's a full email, a full presentation. Like, I know this could be 10% better just by synthesizing some of this down and making this a little bit more eloquent. So things like that. I think the benefits to communication are huge, not just in pen testing, but everywhere. But I think that's definitely the biggest one. I would say I don't think there's any immediate threat to pen testers or the pen test career options, career path with respect to AI, honestly, any more than other IT or other security roles. I've heard the argument, I've heard the fear, and I'm very open-minded about that. I could be wrong, but I don't see it anytime in the near future.
That's good. I'm looking over at the chat. I know there's some questions, guys, I didn't get to. I do want to follow up a little bit, Ben, and this will be kind of the last thing we chat about since we're about the end of the interview.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people may have this in their mind, and this is why the AI part makes sense, where they would picture like a vulnerability assessment, and a pen test as the same. And AI could, of course, do a really good vulnerability assessment where they say you have this vulnerable software. For those who might be new to this field, what is the difference between those two? Like, what's the difference between just running Nessus on a host and doing an actual pen test? Why does the human element matter?
Yeah, I think to answer that, you sort of have to first when you talk about security as a whole, I always use this analogy of like it's very similar to sort of like traffic analysis and how you build cities actually. That when a city or a town is very, very small, you don't tend to have a whole lot of traffic. Things are pretty predictable and pretty straightforward in terms of physical traffic analysis. Not to be confused with network traffic. But you don't tend to have the major the major blockages and pileups and so what you see with Seattle and LA and New York and all over. And I think a lot of that comes from scaling. City infrastructure and roads doesn't scale well. And in similar, I would say Seattle security actually follows a very similar trend that as things get more complex, and I say that both from a technology standpoint. So as we have more devices, more software, the software is interacting with different APIs and interacting in different ways, cloud and on-prem and Active Directory and all these different means of authentication, authorization. It's getting much more complex. But also, as we talk about the size of organizations, an organization that is using multiple clouds or using 100 different apps, all of that is making it harder to secure that environment. So I would say that the question I think is less about what's the distinction between a software tool and human insight, and more of can all of the possible the infinite number of vulnerabilities, whatever those might be, CVEs or misconfigurations or what have you, can those all be caught by automated tools, right? And if you think of the question in that way, the answer it's somewhat rhetorical. The answer is obviously no. And that huge gap between the need of identifying all vulnerabilities and the 5% that automated tools can find, the 95% is where humans come in, and those do tend to be the more complex, more sticky and sometimes research oriented vulnerabilities. But I would say that lion's share of risk is where humans and pen testers come in.
Really good stuff. Ben, thank you again for sharing. Before we sign off, I do just want to encourage you guys, if you have questions, which I know you do because I didn't get to all your questions. If you have more questions, here's a really cool thing. Once again, we have the Rhino Security Labs Discord. Ben is part of that. I'm part of it. I think, honestly, the entire pen testing team at Rhino is part of that Discord. And we have an entire section built up for questions. You can ask questions there, and professionals in the field would be more than happy to come back and answer your questions. Once again, we're not going to say, all right, if you give us $100, we'll coach you for an hour. No, like, ask any question you want, and we will take the time to do our best to answer those questions, and be on the lookout for that free career coaching we'll be rolling out in the near future. Final question, Ben, any just words of wisdom that you have for the InfoSec community at large before we sign off?
I'll go back to my previous statement. Follow your passion, whatever that is.
Follow your passion and just do it, right? Nike, just do it. Follow your passion.
Yeah.
Just do it. Thank you, Ben, again. Thank you, all of you watching on Twitch and watching on YouTube after the fact. Truly, it's an honor for you guys to take the time out of your day to watch this. Hopefully you found something valuable to it. If you didn't, I know I did. So this is super valuable to me. So guys, thank you for hanging out, and I will catch you guys in the next stream. See ya.